Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm Jeff Howard, and I am on Zoom right now with Michael Glover-Smith. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for jumping on. I believe you're in Chicago.
That is correct.
I'm in Los Angeles, thus Zoom. So I will actually remember right now to say to the dear listeners, if our audio quality isn't perfect, just because we're on Zoom and it has to compress the audio a little, and there's a micro delay with Zoom, so even though for us we're not interrupting each other, sometimes on playback the voices that get closer together. But I swear to God, I will never. I've gotten pretty good at not interrupting guests. It took a while. It kind of took every time my life partner said to me, "Do you interrupt people?" Because she feels I always interrupt her. But I'm not like that on the podcast. So anyway, silly statement. I met Michael at Sherman Oaks Film Festival last year in 2024 in December because your film, Handle with Care, that you wrote and directed, and I see you didn't give yourself a producer credit, but we know how indie films are. If you wrote and directed it, I'm sure you wore a lot of producer hats too and some post-production hats, all kinds of hats.
Absolutely. I think it looks a little tacky if you give yourself too many credits.
I will interrupt your introduction to share a truth, which is when I am watching screeners, particularly if my wife is sitting next to me, and when I'm watching screeners for the film festival, if I see the filmmaker's name more than three times maybe, but if it gets like 4 or 5, I just say to myself, "Well, I know why you made this film."
And yeah, you don't need to credit yourself for catering.
You don't need to cater yourself for all that stuff. And it's funny because I actually will say to her, "Well, let's see if this person can prove us wrong." But especially if they start with a film by, and then they need to say written by, and then directed by. Like if the written and directed card were 1, maybe. But anyway, all right. So that's a pet peeve from a bitter festival runner. But I interrupted because Handle with Care also took home the Programmer's Prize for Exceptional Filmmaking. It's a superb film. Really enjoyed. I was really happy that I got to moderate your Q&A at the festival because one of my favorite films of the season and such a great one. And I have to say, the Chicago indie film community, I've just got an affinity for it at this point. I just see so much quality stuff from that community, from your community, and your producer and lead actor, Alyssa Thordarson. I see her all the time. Like in my home, she's like a star because I can name like 3 or 4 really great films that Alyssa has been the lead in. You know? And it's not like I can say someone in line at the supermarket, "Boy, do you see the last film Alyssa was in?"
Right.
I would have to find another festival runner, I guess, to share that stuff. But it's an excellent film. So, and I believe are you still on your festival run?
No, you were actually our final screening.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was really thrilling to close out in LA. We shot the film in January of 24. We premiered in February of 24. So we premiered right after we finished at a great festival in Florence, Alabama called the George Lindsay Film Festival. And then you were our 15th and final festival, and we're now online.
So you got 15 festivals in 10 months.
Yeah.
And we were your LA premiere, and then you went online.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is such a great way to do it. That's awesome. You had a great year with it.
It was a dream. I mean, my biggest source of anxiety as a director is the gap between when the film is finished and when it premieres. After it premieres, I really don't worry about it. I feel like, everything will be fine. It's just getting that first screening out of the way that is difficult. And I've never premiered so fast after finishing. And So it was really nice to just have that be my project for the year 2024, and to kind of put it to bed at the very end of the year. You can stream it right now on the website of Split Tooth Media, which is a really cool website devoted to film and music criticism. And so, we were streaming there before Christmas, but we had a really, healthy festival run. So I was really glad to come out to LA and do that Q&A with you, and not only you, but my producer, John Otterbacher, and my DP, Puya Shabazi, who lives in LA. Unfortunately, Alyssa couldn't come, but hopefully next time.
You never know. She's probably shooting something, or who knows. But
Yeah.
but it was an excellent screening. I believe a packed house.
Yeah,
And
it was full.
A beautiful theater, and boy, to see a film, it's shot in black and white, and it looks so good.
It looked so good on the big screen. Yeah,
I have to say, you always I don't think I'll ever get numb to the change from watching it. And I connect my laptop. I got an HDMI cable to the 55-inch TV. So I try to watch stuff to get a feel for its cinematic qualities.
Right.
But still, when you go from 55 inches to 65 feet, and it just looks as crisp and clear and beautiful, and all the tones in your black and white are coming through. It's just, wow, it's such an effective medium at that level. It really, boy, it breaks my heart, the people who, I might have a teenager who watches things on her phone, and I just think about, like, what is deprived when one doesn't look at things on big formats, I guess. Something bigger is better.
When it comes to film, definitely.
Yeah, when it comes to exhibiting film, for sure. What do you want to do? Do you want to stand a mile away from the Eiffel Tower and look at it? Or do you want to get up underneath and look up?
Exactly. Good analogy.
Yeah, I just pulled that one out of my butt. I never used it before. Okay, that'll be on the next 20 podcasts. Well, fair enough. So make sure to send me, actually, when we get off, send me an email with the Split Tooth Media link to it, so that we can make that clickable in the show notes and people can go right to it. Heck, I even give every listener permission, or I'm even requesting, hit pause, watch the film, and then come back if you're that cool, because it's well worth it, and it's not super long.
No, it's actually a little under 8 minutes with credits.
Yeah, so we're just asking you to take an 8-minute break, watch Handle with care, and then come back. So, excellent. Well, with that in mind, I'm so glad people can see it. And now let's talk about you. I know you wrote and directed this from our chats at the festival, which weren't long, but I got the sense that this wasn't your first rodeo at all. So what got you into indie film? Have you been a creative person all your life?
Oh, yes. When I was a child, I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I basically tried my hand at all of the arts. In fact, I just recently discovered a preschool report card where a teacher basically talked about how singing was my favorite activity. Which I thought was funny because I had no memory of that. But when I was a kid, I would draw, I would write. I got involved in theater fairly young, but filmmaking came later because I grew up in the 80s and early 90s. That's when I was in high school, and there were no film schools in North Carolina at all. And, now there's a film school at every college. But back then, everything, of course, was shot on film. So it just seemed very inaccessible. Filmmaking seemed like something people were doing on another planet. Like, that's what you did in Hollywood. But I loved movies as a kid. I've told this story many times. I saw Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock when I was 10 years old, and I just fell in love with it. Hitchcock and Sergio Leone were really the two directors who kind of showed me what a director was. Like what I was responding to when I first saw The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at the age of 9 years old, and when I saw Psycho, I was responding to the style of the filmmaking, and that was different because prior to that, I was responding to the actors, I was responding to the story. And it wasn't until I moved to Chicago. I moved to Chicago to study theater at DePaul University. And after I got up here, I realized that, I'm not a good actor. I belong on the other side of the camera, and I became aware of the fact that, Columbia College had a film school and it had a very hands-on approach. You could just enroll in classes, get your hands on equipment, and go out and make movies. So that's what I did, beginning in the late 90s. And, 2025, here we are, still doing it.
You are. So when you were young, you were just interested in performing.
Yeah.
But were you the kind of kid that wrote short stories and stuff? Or?
Oh, yeah. I was writing all the time.
Yeah. So you were a natural storyteller.
Exactly. In fact, I went to a performing arts high school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, called the North Carolina School of the Arts. And I was studying theater there. And one of the things we had to do was to keep a journal. And my acting teacher, we'd have to turn in our journal to him and he would read it and give us feedback. And he told me, he said, "You need to be a writer. Have you ever considered writing?" And I said, no, I want to be an actor. And, he was right.
I'll share. I had the same experience in, I think it was 11th grade, but it was funny. One of my close friends asked our AP English teacher, he said, and this is of course the 80s, he said, "Who's the best writer in the class?" And he named all these top kids, and the teacher said, "No, it's Jeff Howard." And he told me that's what the English teacher who I looked up to said. And
Wow.
All of a sudden I took myself a little more serious. You know what? It was that acknowledgement was huge.
Yeah. I mean, it's really important when you're young to get encouragement from the right person. It can alter your life.
Yeah. And Hitchcock and Sergio Leone, I think people who are natural storytellers, when you see an auteur film where it's mind-blowing when you realize, oh, this is like an individual's vision.
Right.
Just like when you read a story or see a play. Yeah, movies when you're young, right? Movies just seem like they're just something from Hollywood.
Right. And
then when you realize, oh, there's an author.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's someone imprinting their ideas on it. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and prior to watching The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I was a fan of Clint Eastwood as an actor. That's why I watched that film. I had seen him in Any Which Way You Can, the movie, Every Which Way.
Oh my God, my parents took me to see that when I was a kid in the theater. That was like the most fun I ever had.
Those are perfect children's films, right? Clint Eastwood hanging out with a chimpanzee.
That would punch people out the window. It was hilariously silly that they took this Western action hero and put him in a silly monkey movie. But I guess that was the late 70s?
Yeah, late 70s, early 80s. He did two of them. And then in 1983, he was in a film called City Heat with Burt Reynolds, which was sort of like a buddy cop comedy, set in the 1930s. And I saw that in the theater, when I was 7 or 8 years old. And then, so when I watched The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I was watching it as a Clint Eastwood film, but it was immediately apparent to me that film was the expression of the person who directed it, because the style was so exuberant, with those kind of extreme close-ups and the music and everything. There was something different about it. So I started watching, the other spaghetti westerns and so on and so forth.
Yeah. It is funny because I also, whatever, we can just share what it's like to be a certain age or to grow up. Yeah, because in our era, there were no video cameras. Video cameras were unattainable things that were the size of a suitcase.
Right. And maybe you had a friend who was rich, whose parents had one.
Yeah. But then if you touched it, you were like, you were told that thing cost more than a car or something silly.
Yeah.
But and then even the video stores weren't super common. I bet when you first saw some of those films, was that like on TV with commercials?
Yeah. You know what station was a big influence on me was TBS, which was Ted Turner's station, before Turner Classic Movies. I grew up in Charlotte, so I was watching the Atlanta Braves baseball team on his station because he owned the cable station, and then he also owned the baseball team. And they would show old movies all the time, and they just showed a crazy mix of films. They showed James Bond films and classic
Yeah,
Hollywood
he
films.
owned the MGM library, right? Isn't that how he pulled it off?
I'm
Something
not
like that.
sure. I know he owned the Warner Brothers library
Okay.
because he famously colorized Casablanca in the 80s, which was very controversial. He was colorizing black and white films until there was a big uproar, and then he quit. But yeah, watching those films on regular TV with commercial breaks, and then eventually when I got a VCR, I would tape the films off of TV, and they had the commercials in them. That's how I really fell in love with cinema.
Yeah, fantastic. And then this wonderful, I mean, I guess retrospectively it'll be a short window of time, but then video stores happened, and then an enthusiastic kid like yourself can really just start diving into. Yeah, it is always interesting, the kids that followed directors instead of kids who followed actors, right? If you
Right.
went, oh, I'm gonna pull their, like, well, I grew up in LA, so actually the local video store, when we finally had one, had like a Hitchcock section and
Yeah.
they did sections by director, and it started to make you realize, oh, it's like the library.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and it matters who there is a creator there. Well, so that's cool. So all right, so cool that you went to DePaul, by the way. But then you switched to Columbia College specifically because they had a very practical filmmaking program.
Yeah, that's where I got my BA, and that was in the year 2000. And then I moved to Northern California to go to grad school. I went to Humboldt State University, and that's where I got my master's in film production. And then moved back to Chicago, and that's when I started making
Wow,
film.
that must have been cool. For those who don't know, Humboldt, that's northern. That's real Northern California. It's not the Bay Area, which is actually in the
Yeah,
middle of California. That's halfway up to Oregon in the forest.
everybody who does not live on the West Coast thinks that San Francisco is Northern California. And, when I would tell people I lived in Northern California, they would say, near San Francisco, I would say, no, that's a 5-hour drive south.
Yeah,
So,
as
yeah,
far as it takes to get from LA to San Francisco, is
yeah,
how long it from San Francisco to, yeah, and you're like, it's similar to rural Oregon.
right, exactly.
So that
But
must have
it's a
been a
really,
really cool place to shoot.
are you kidding me? It's the most beautiful part of the country. You're in the redwoods, and you're also on the coast.
Yeah,
Um,
and you don't have, and I'm sure all the local businesses are like, "Oh, you want to shoot here? No problem." Like it's
exactly.
not like student films. Poor kids going to all the great film schools in the LA area. You walk up to an independent coffee house and they like, "Oh yeah, you could shoot here for an afternoon. Give us $500." It's just like I probably should have multiplied that number by 10. But yeah, so Humboldt must have been a really great place to work on that.
It was incredible, and we were still shooting on 16 millimeter, even in the early 2000s, which was kind of a blessing and a curse. I mean, film is amazing, but by the time I got my degree and moved back to Chicago, everybody who was making independent films had adopted, digital video.
Right,
And,
that was a
and
transition. Like there was a Canon camera or something. Like everyone started jumping over to whatever it was, mini DV or something.
mini DV, yeah, there were
Yeah.
still,
Weird
digital videotape.
little video cassette that was, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of intimidating because it was 2004 and I had never shot on a digital camera.
But
And
you
it took,
also, right? You had the experience of editing on a flatbed, probably, and
yep.
all those slower processes that I'm sure there's an argument that that's a really great. Those are great things to learn long term.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there was a positive and a negative to it. I mean, I think just because I grew up in the 20th century, when I think of film, I think of seeing a film projected on film on the big screen, and I always will. I mean, until the day I die. That's what a movie is to me. And so it's interesting being part of this, independent filmmaking community in Chicago, and to work with a lot of young people who are really thinking of it primarily as something that's going to be seen on a computer monitor. And that affects how they edit, that affects how they color grade. It's like a completely different thing.
It really is. Yeah. It's
It,
such
it
a
affects
different
how they
perspective.
compose. It affects how they compose the image. It's like they're not as, I think, willing to use wide shots. They're not as willing to use long takes.
Even it's funny, I haven't thought of this for the longest time, but around 1997, I was talking to a cinematographer. We were working together actually, and around 97 we were shooting on 16, and he was saying how actually in general if you pay attention to it, stuff shot for TV, the camera tends to be almost level with their faces. And
Yeah,
stuff shot for film, the camera's a little lower because it was the difference between looking at your TV and looking up at a screen.
yeah, totally.
And I bet so, and now what's happened is I think TV has just become movies. Like TV shows have become super cinematic, I think.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I think the production value of television shows has gone up, and the cinematography is more prestigious looking. But at the same time, I think there's still that problem of television still being way more dialogue based. And I've heard that Netflix is telling their filmmakers to make sure that plot is explained in dialogue. The reason being that people are watching Netflix with their ears and not their eyes. People are scrolling on their phones while they're watching something on TV, and then it's like if something dramatic happens, they look up to see what happened. If there's a gunshot, so
I
they need the story told through the words. And in a way, I think TV and cinema are still. I think they're further apart than a lot of people realize.
I like to think so. Yeah, I've actually. I mean, a few friends of mine have said we had a meeting in Netflix and they call it the two screen directive. You have to create now knowing that your audience has two screens.
Right.
You're fighting with the phone, or you want to occupy their phone too and like mention things that they'll look up while. Like,
Right.
but yeah, if there's an important plot point, don't just put in the dialogue. Repeat it because
Yeah.
they might
Right.
miss it the first time, and it's more annoying to have your audience lose track of what's going on than the people who are paying attention. They can handle hearing it a second time. It's
Yeah.
just it's not how storytelling was meant to be. It's a pretty that's a bummer. I'm glad that the festivals were still in a theater, and if I ever saw the light of a phone light up during a screening, I'll get mad. But anyway, that's why we show a bumper that shows a wombat, breaking their phone. But anyway, all right. So after Humboldt, you went straight back to Chicago. There was that was the city for you. No thought about Charlotte or anything.
No, because I still had friends in Chicago, and that's where I felt like my roots were. And so I moved back. But it took a while before I started actually making films. First, I was writing screenplays and sort of trying to get them financed, but I didn't really know how to go about doing that. And so it took a while. And then eventually I started directing shorts. And I started working with people who had access to digital, equipment. And so I sort of taught myself digital editing and digital cinematography, and then eventually, after doing a couple shorts that got into some festivals, then I thought, okay, I need to be a little more ambitious. And then I wrote my first feature, which was a no-budget movie called Cool Apocalypse. And I shot that in the summer of 2014. And then since then, I've made 3 more features. And then the most recent of which is a film called Relative, which came out in 2022. And that's distributed by Music Box Films, which was really the best thing that ever happened to me. We actually screened that in LA at the American Cinematheque in 2022 in the fall. They gave us 2 screenings over a weekend, and that was a fantastic experience. And then since then, I've been trying to raise money to do another feature, but it's still very, very difficult. So I kind of returned to making shorts, and I think both of my shorts screened at Sherman Oaks. The one I co-directed with Alyssa, which is called Paper Planes, and then, of course, Handle with Care, which I directed and she helped me produce.
Right. So very cool. So you've got 3 features under your belt.
4
features.
Yeah.
And then I would assume the reason a short pops up again, like Handle with Care or Paper Planes, was just an idea that was too good to skip on, and it was just an idea that you knew you could pop out in a weekend, so to speak. Or
no, not at all.
Oh no, not at all.
No, it was more like I was supposed to make another feature, and the financing fell through at the last minute. And our DP, Puya, said, hey, I don't have anything to do next month, which was when we were going to shoot. He was like, can't you just write a short and I'll just do it for no money? I think he asked Alyssa first, and I don't think she had any ideas. And she kind of said to me, hey, you should just write something, so we can do another another Paper Planes type, film. And I had this idea about a first date. And so we just knocked that out in a single day.
So cool. That might be the first time I've heard of a film happening because the cinematographer said, look, write something so I can work for you for free. Normally it's the opposite, right? Normally it's like you have a cinematographer and you go, look, I know you deserve to be paid, but the script's really good. Read it. You might like it. And it was someone going, I've got some free time. Give me something to do.
Well, I should specify he did get paid.
Very good. He just offered to, he just made a kind offer. Or I thought it was in the story, but.
Yeah, it was, it was lower than what he would have gotten paid, his day rate, if we had done the feature. But you know how it is, independent filmmaking. Everybody.
Yeah, no, and by the way, kudos to you. It does mean something that you make sure your crew gets something. Yeah. That's great. Well, so between well, tell me. So it's funny you got to like the modern day really fast.
Yeah, I just skipped right through.
You skipped right through. So how different is it when you're making a feature or making a short? Like, is it almost the same for you, or is it I mean, I know a feature, the process is longer, but is it kind of a different perspective for you honestly, I assume most of the time you're writing and directing.
It feels the same. It really does. In fact, I like features. I like a longer running time. I like spending time with characters because my films are all character based. They're not plot based. And once you start making a movie, it's easy to keep going because you're kind of inside of it. You know what I mean? I'm always amazed that people spend a crazy amount of money on a short and that they spend a lot of time shooting a short. It's like people will spend weeks shooting a short film, and I think that's insane. It's like, or even just even a few days. It's almost like tack a few more days on there and turn it into a feature. Because once it's like a film production is like a machine. It's like once you get it started, it's easy to keep it going. So I prefer features, but financially, it's easier to shoot a short in 2 days, which is what we did with Paper Planes. And I was, I kind of taught Alyssa how to do that because she had written and starred in a film called After, a Love Story, which I believe also played at Sherman Oaks.
That was my first experience with Alyssa. Yeah.
That's an excellent film, and that was directed by our mutual friend Claire Cooney. And when Alyssa wrote Paper Planes, I kind of asked her, how much money did you spend creating After? And she told me, and I said, okay, I said, if you want me to help you do Paper Planes, I would love to make this with you, but my suggestion is that we do it for a tiny fraction of what you spent on that one, and we do it in less time. So I kind of showed her how I work, and I think that gave her a lot of confidence. I also insisted that she direct it because I think a lot of people who have never directed, especially if they're coming from the world of acting, they think that they need a lot of technical knowledge, and so they find it intimidating. But I said, Alyssa, this is your script. Like, it's your story. It's your film. You should direct it. And she said, I don't think I have the experience or the knowledge. And I said, well, why don't you and I co-direct it? And I'll show you how I work with a cinematographer, and I'll show you how I work with an editor. I'll invite you into the editing room. And after we were done, she said, oh, I get it. You don't need to know everything. You hire people who know how to do things and you work with them. And I said, yeah, that's exactly right. So I hope she has a script for a feature that's very, very good that she's trying to make, that she would direct herself. And I hope she gets that done because she's a natural born director.
For sure. And but also, well, so let's I'm just going to turn our attention to Handle with Care. So you were described it as a date, but needless to say, it's I think, I don't know, I probably said it much better at our Q&A at the festival, but it is a brilliant allegory for human relationships. And even though it's a first date, there's surprises to the story that really just take human vulnerability to an allegorical limit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so even in a film that's under 8 minutes, it just has a really strong emotional impact. In fact, I'm proud I trust that you'll be proud of this. Actually, we had some jury arguments because we did have a person or two say, why is a woman frail? Why, like they got into that, and then and then other women on the jury be like, how do we feel in society right now? Like I feel like anything, I feel like I feel under attack, So I think you even so that juror actually even expanded it just from the relationship level to like the societal level, that women are we have made women feel very vulnerable in this current era.
Yeah. Wow, I love hearing that. Thank you for the window into your jury deliberation process.
Well, it is always, I guess I will. There was a handful of films that led to said debates because, and I just kept saying, in your case, you wrote and directed it, but some of them were written and directed by women, and other women were like, why are the women so vulnerable? Why are the women victims? And I'm like, they must feel like victims by society right now. I mean, my God, we didn't think that Trump was going to affect storytelling.
Right.
So anyway, sorry to bring, I kind of have a rule with myself to never bring that in. But anyway, I said the name. So we can move on. So Are you just always you have your eyes on another feature, but what might will there be a short too? Do you think you'll is it just really based upon patience and squeezing shorts in between features because there's time?
Yeah, it's really time. I mean, I am the kind of filmmaker who likes to work. I like to make things. And if I feel like it's going to be a while before I can make a feature, I will absolutely return to the short format. And I do love shorts. Don't get me wrong. When I said I prefer features earlier, it's cool to make shorts because you can do things in a short that maybe you couldn't do in a feature. And I think with Handle with Care specifically, I was trying to write something that was super short. I thought, how much emotion can I cram into, a 6-page short film, a 6-page script, and how, I think all of my films are kind of an exercise in leaving important things off screen and, having the subtext be important. And I thought, how do I do that in a short film and still make people, feel something? That was kind of the goal. And, the response has been very gratifying. I think some people don't get it, but that's okay. I've heard enough feedback from enough people, including people I don't know, to know that it's reached the people that it needs to reach.
Yeah, for sure. And look, with art, there really is no one makes art with the expectation that it'll be universally understood, right? I mean, we know human beings, there's just so much variety in audiences. There are some people that, the perfect thing for them is and this is me being an elitist jerk, but like Top Gun is probably like the best thing in the world for a lot of people.
Right.
It's not the best thing in the world for me. I know the people who made Top Gun don't need me in their audience. They're doing just fine. But
Yeah.
but thank goodness there's artists like yourself making things for people like me who want something a little more human, a little more creative, a little more original.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I think as an artist, you can only do what feels natural. Once my dad actually said to me, why don't you try and make a movie like Alfred Hitchcock? And I think he meant, why don't you try and do a genre film? Why don't you try and do a film that's more plot based? And it's just, even though I love watching a lot of films like that, it's just not natural for me to write a film like that. So to a certain extent, being an artist is about doing what you can, rather than maybe even what you want to do.
Yeah, very much. And Lord knows we can appreciate things. Actually, I imagine sometimes things I appreciate are because something like that could never come from me. So I really appreciate when it comes from someone else. Like,
Yeah.
I love a dark comedy, and I could never make death funny.
Right.
Like for me, I'm too serious a guy something. I don't know. I could never. So when someone has a dark comedy where people are dying on screen and I'm laughing, I'm like, oh, thank God someone has this skill set because
Yeah.
really wonderful. But boy, it's I could never. If someone said write a dark comedy, I'd be like, I can't even tell maybe I could do a joke, but like,
Right.
I can't think of a story where people die and it's amusing.
Yeah. I love horror movies, and I doubt that I will ever make one.
Yeah, I
do
suppose
love
that could have been your dad's challenge. Just like, look, make a horror, scare people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but deep down, you don't want to scare people. You want to communicate something else.
Exactly.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, should I ask you about the Chicago indie film scene, of which it feels like you're a part of?
Yeah, absolutely. I love working in Chicago. I mean, I teach here for a living. So I teach film production at DePaul University, and I teach film history at several other colleges. So that's what I do to pay the bills. And, I've been lucky to kind of be part of this very vibrant community of local independent filmmakers. I've worked with the same people a lot over and over again. And I'm always trying to kind of boost their work as indie filmmakers. My buddy Aaron Wertheimer, who produced my last feature, Relative, he just directed a feature called Not If I See You First, which I'm going to tell him to submit to Sherman Oaks. And he gave me a little cameo in it as a record store owner. So I have one line of dialogue in his film. So it's really great to, work with people who kind of, do the same thing that you're doing, and to not feel competitive with them, but to kind of just hope that they're successful too, because we're all kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, it's so cool that it's collaborative now and not competitive. Before we started recording, I think we chatted about how the festival scene used to have a competitive vibe and now it has a collaborative vibe.
Yeah.
And it's so much healthier. But also I want to say, you are probably the fourth person who teaches film at the university level. I don't know if you're technically a professor or
I'm an adjunct.
See, that's the term. I think most of the guys, most of the people I talk to but we have had so many great films now by people who teach film at the college level, adjunct professors, so to speak. And you all send these really great shorts to us, like the work, and often and sometimes a great feature too. And so I just love saying it's proof that silly maxim that those who can't do teach is bullshit.
Yep.
Because these teachers, one gentleman, I believe he lives in Idaho and teaches film at a college in Idaho, and he made an amazing film about recovering from alcoholism and gave himself like a strict rule. Like he says, okay, the hardest thing to do is to cut from a 2-shot to a 2-shot. So my rule for this 20-minute short is only cutting that way and making it work.
Yeah.
And then he said it all in AA meetings, and it's just amazing. It's just brilliant work. And I was just sitting there actually in the same theater I once did a Q&A with Alyssa in, and I was like, wow, this film was literally a personal challenge. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah, it's really important, I think, to kind of to give yourself limitations. Because if you're an independent filmmaker, I mean, there are going to be limitations anyway. But to impose limitations on yourself and then try to come up with creative solutions, it forces you to, I think, to think outside of the box, and to grow as a filmmaker.
For sure. All right, one last one. I think a natural question is, does teaching also expose you to lots of young people who, if you're crewing up a feature, you can offer opportunities to?
Yeah, absolutely. The guy who shot Handle with Care is my former student.
Fantastic.
Yeah. He was my former student at Oakton College in the suburbs of Chicago, and we just stayed friends. And he went on to major in film production, and he reached out to me and said, I'd love to shoot something for you. And this was coincidentally around the same time that Alyssa reached out to me about collaborating on Handle with Care. So I felt like it was almost destiny that I was talking to two different people, and it almost just felt, it was so natural to just say, oh yeah, well, my friend Alyssa wrote this script. Do you want to shoot it? It all just kind of came together in a very organic way.
So cool. That's excellent. Well, I'm so happy for you. This is like kind of, I mean, I don't mean to put down any of the indie filmmakers who don't end up teaching, but it's got to be the best. I feel like that's got to be one of the best way. I feel like that teaching film at universities, it's got to probably be better than, making ends meet, as a film, like editing reality shows, or not to put down my friends who make a living editing and
Right.
stuff. But you know what I mean? Like it's got to keep you fresher too, I think, than slaving away, because if you're working on crews all the time and then occasionally making your own thing, I mean, I assume you work quite hard as an adjunct professor, but at the same time, it's not like 16-hour days in the cold, and then you've got to get home and work on your own ideas.
Yeah, and then the other great thing is, as a teacher, you have time off. You have 3 weeks between spring semester and summer semester, and another 3 weeks between summer and fall. So that's when you shoot, when you're on break.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I've been to Chicago in the spring and the fall. I got to admit, those are the best times anyway.
They sure are. That's when everybody shoots. I mean, you also have 3 weeks off between fall and spring, and nobody shoots at that time.
No,
except I did for both of my shorts. There's snow on the ground in both of those films.
That's true. That's true.
We shot them in January. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've never done a feature in the winter.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, that would be tough. That would be.
Yeah.
Unless you seem too wise to make a film that's two people in an apartment that never go outside for an hour and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I've never seen a good one. I've seen a good film that was pretty much two people in a home. But boy, that's tough. All right. Well, wonderful. Is there a website or something where you have links and connections to all your work?
No, there's not. I used to have a personal website, which was whitecitycinema.com, as in Devil in the White City. But I let the domain name expire. I never renewed it. But you can find links to my work on social media, and my name is White City Cinema on both Instagram and Twitter. And Instagram is really the place to go if you want to find out, what I'm up to.
Excellent. Because Lord knows in this current era, I guess there's that justwatch.com, but someone could even look you up on IMDb and can we catch your the earlier features?
Yes, Relative and the two before that, Mercury in Retrograde and Rendezvous in Chicago, are all streaming on multiple, services, including Amazon. We survived the Amazon indie purge. So, check them out.
Excellent. All right. Well, I certainly recommend it. I recommend people watch this stuff. And very cool that they can go to Split Tooth Media and see Handle with Care. And I guess... if I didn't have all these film submissions to watch as a member of the jury, I'd be like, I want to watch your other shorts because I've seen two of them.
Yeah.
You're 2 for 2 in my book, sir.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
All right. Well, I will do the closing spiel, as I call it. But first, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to hop onto the podcast.
I had a blast. Let's do it again.
Yeah, we will. And anyone listening, we just finished the interview, which means I'll do this wrap up, but then I'll hit record again, and Mike will answer the 4 questions, as I call them, which is name 3 films you love, underrated, overrated, and something lesser known. Just kind of a fun way to chat about movies. But all right, so if you are listening to this podcast, feel free to like and subscribe. Doesn't hurt to be kind. You could even write a review if you want. If you want to learn more about this podcast or a TV series that was born from it that is currently dormant, but there's 7 seasons up right now, go to discoverindiefilm.com. On social media, it's always at DIFwins. I have personally quit social media, but if you go to the at DIFwins on Blue Sky, that's where I am. My podcast producer, Karina, handles the Instagram and Facebook, and we kind of pulled it off of Twitter, actually. We canceled our Twitter accounts. What are you going to do?
I don't blame you.
Yeah, it just felt like, why are we bothering to update this? So anyway, that's discoverindiefilm.com. And when I mention a TV series, That is, we did 7 seasons of something on Amazon Prime Video called Discover Indie Film. So if you go to Amazon Prime Video on your smart TV, hopefully you're not looking at it on your phone, because I've already said don't watch movies on your phone. But there are about 150 short films in those 10 seasons. No, it's got to be more than that. But anyway, there's 7 seasons of Discover Indie Film on Amazon Prime Video, and if you think about it, $7.99 to watch 5 hours of high quality indie films handpicked from the festival circuit. That's not a bad deal. But normally I don't mention it, but you made me feel like mentioning it today because you're inspiring me that people care. So anyway, that's Discover Indie Film. If you want to learn about the nonprofit that runs 2 film festivals in the LA area, that's discoverindiefilm.org. That's the Discover Indie Film Foundation, which actually runs Sherman Oaks Film Festival and Film Invasion Los Angeles. So yeah, we got Michael's film, Handle with Care. We premiered in LA at the Sherman Oaks Film Festival. We hold that every December. This December, we hold our 10th edition, our 10th anniversary. So we're pulling out some fun things for that. If you want to learn more, go to ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at Sherman Oaks FF on social media. I mentioned the sister festival, Film Invasion LA. We're having the 10th one of those in June. So, we're getting to mid-April, so time for me to start panicking. But learn more about that at filminvasionla.com, and it's at filminvasionla on social media. And I'll finally mention to people, there was always talk of a second Film Invasion. Every time I met people who were like, I'd like to start a film festival in my town, if I knew them to be a quality person, I would say, well, the idea with Film Invasion, actually, when we started Film Invasion LA, I had a friend who was a teacher up in Oakland, California. And he was this close to starting Film Invasion Oakland, but didn't do it. London was a near miss. But January 2026, we're going to have Film Invasion Lima, Peru.
Wow.
And I get to fly to Lima in January when it's very cold. You might want to come because it's summer in Lima in January. It's south of the equator, I guess. So it's summer down there and cold AF in Chicago on January 16th and 17th, I would assume. Well, anyway, there we go. That's my wrap up. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Jeff.
And what's the cat? No one knows this but me, but there's a gorgeous cat on your lap now.
Yes, her name is Hetty.
Hetty's a beauty.
Yeah.
All right.
She always wants to, she whenever I have a Zoom meeting, she knows that that's where my attention is. So.
You know, and she knows. Yeah, exactly. She's like, you can. Oh, she's loving the scratches.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. I love it to end with a pet. All right. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.